This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Detroit is the greatest! Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Darren McCarty comes back with Neiman in front of him. McCarty draws. McCarty in. McCarty scores! A magnificent goal! Darren McCarty!
Stafford takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Welcome in, everybody, to the latest edition of the Motor City Sports Rant. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Jason Jarvie will be calling in shortly. I am looking forward to the conversation with him. Lots to talk about regarding the Kentucky Derby. Ken Holland, probably no longer part of the Red Wing organization. Lots to get to in terms of what does this mean for the Red Wings? What does this mean for Steve Yzerman, who announced that he hired Pat Verbeek? The little ball of hate is now rejoined with the Red Wings organization, and a lot of people are excited for that. Hearing the news of Ken Holland leaving, not too surprising, but it does bring about the fair question, how are we supposed to look at Ken Holland's tenure with the Red Wings? Because when you say, hey, Ken Holland, thank you for what you've done, then people kind of jump down your throat and say, hey, what about those contracts? What about all the people that he signed on in the rebuild and things like that? Well, one of the things that I think people are debating is how much leeway did Ken Holland have to actually rebuild? Was it a situation in which he was a good soldier? Did he follow orders of upper management, a la Chris Ilitch, the onus of, hey, continue to get to the postseason, continue to make this thing happen year after year, make trades, make moves, trade some pieces off. But some of the contracts that he gave out weren't the best. So, and you look at it and you say, okay, you also have to acknowledge the good that he did. I was talking to another media member at the USPBL Media Day, and we were talking about Ken Holland, and I said, look, even though he was granted a boatload of money, he spent it properly. I mean, there are tons of teams that have the opportunity to go and buy pieces, and they don't win. Ken Holland was afforded opportunities to be flush with cash to go out and select players, and he selected the right ones. So you still have to give credit where credit's due in terms of what Ken Holland was able to do, being part of 4 Stanley Cups, 3 as general manager. So quite an impressive run, many years with the Red Wing organization, but I'm curious to see what Jason thinks in regards to how successful could Ken Holland be with the Edmonton Oilers. So Jason's going to call in shortly. Look forward to talking to him about the things that happened over the weekend with the Kentucky Derby, the Detroit Tigers, and Miguel Cabrera. It'll be a fun conversation when he does dial in. All right, Jason Jarvie is on the line. What's up, sir? Good to talk to you.
It's been a little while, but we got a bunch to discuss.
No doubt. I'm sure you heard the news. Ken Holland likely getting a fat pay raise, a 5-year contract when he does sign it with the Edmonton Oilers, leaving the Red Wings organization, and he's going to be the new general manager of the Edmonton Oilers. Now, some people think that have messaged us that he's going to be an epic failure there, that the Canadian media market's going to eat him up. But when you look at the Oilers, they've missed the playoffs 12 of the last 13 years. So consistently getting to the playoffs, if he can do that with Connor McDavid, then he's probably going to be okay. I do think he'll last quite a bit of time there, but to open the podcast, I wanted to get your sense of your reaction to the news that Ken Holland probably no longer going to be with the Red Wings organization, how you view his tenure, and do you look at it and say, you know what, I'll be fair and thank him for the time that he was here and what he did, but also be very critical of what he did with those contracts, those bad contracts that he laced the Red Wings with? Or do you say, you know what, thank you, good luck, now we can turn our attention to Steve Yzerman and Pat Verbeek, and the actual new era of the Red Wings can kick off?
I think this really was it was inevitable. When they had the press conference and they announced Steve Yzerman was the new GM, it just didn't feel right that Ken Holland was still there. Steve Yzerman couldn't fully become and take over and make this his team until Ken Holland was gone. And nothing against Ken Holland, but we need a new era here in Detroit. It was a great time. We made the play. We set the record for most times making the playoffs. We had the 3 Stanley Cups, and I thank him for all of that. And I'm actually glad that this has happened. And it's all the best for him. I think with the contract, I think he's making just as much as Steve Yzerman is making here in Detroit. I think it's like a 5-year, $25 million deal. So it's like, and that does show credit to how good of a GM he was and what he can still maybe be able to do. The Edmonton Oilers have missed the playoffs a ton, and they've really been a joke, but they have Connor McDavid, who is one of the best young players in the NHL. So I wouldn't be surprised if Ken Holland is able to, at least turn it around a little bit and make Edmonton at least a playoff team. I'm happy for him, and I do. I'm not gonna shun anybody who brought us Stanley Cup victories.
Exactly. Now, he was part of 3 Stanley Cup victories, 4 in total, 3 as general manager. A guy that it's interesting to talk about, because how much credit do you give Ken Holland for the Cups? Because people really are quick. I mean, really quick, Jason, to throw down and say, well, he had all this money and he was lucky enough to be part of great teams and things like that. Like, they're discounting putting a team together. And I'm fascinated by that because of the fact that, he took advantage of the opportunities, but there are a lot of teams that have money that don't consistently win. You still got to put the right pieces together. You still got to have the willingness to make tough moves, to be shrewd. So even though the rebuild didn't go exactly right, I still give him credit for spending the money wisely and being part of 3 Stanley Cup winning teams. I'm just fascinated by the fans that message us on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. They're just like, oh, he had all this cash and it was easy for him. I don't think it's that easy to put together a Stanley Cup winning team, even if there's unlimited funds and there's no salary cap.
And I think you can say that about the first and second, the 98 and 2002. Yeah, you can claim that, his first one, he stepped into a winning organization. In 2002, that was a Hall of Fame lineup, not just an All-Star lineup. It was a Hall of Fame lineup that was put together with the talent that was on the team. But you got to really give him credit for 2008, because that's in the cap era, and that was coming out of the NHL lockout. You had no idea. Everyone kind of figured that the Wings, that the salary cap was going to hinder exactly how they had built their teams in the past, and we still competed. We won 1 Stanley Cup, and we got to another Stanley Cup and got so close to winning a second Stanley Cup. He could have been a part of 4 Stanley Cup victories there, and basically got robbed by Sidney Crosby.
Yeah. Oh, man. Game 7. I'll never forget it. My wife incorrectly told me, because I was so nervous back in 2009, I couldn't watch Game 7. So what I did was I went golfing with the wife. We were about to tee off on the first hole, and it was late, too. We teed off around 7 o'clock. I distinctly remember hearing a loud cheer, a loud noise at least, and I'm like, oh, my God, what happened? And she went inside and checked on it, and she came back. She's like, the Red Wings scored first. So I was sitting pretty. I was like, oh, man, maybe they did score first. So I went in the bunker for Game 7, and we went for a walk nearby. So we drove around a little bit because I had a lot of nervous energy. We walk, I think it was in St. Clair Shores, and we were walking, and I look in someone's house that had one of those windows where you could see the TV, and my first visual was the Pittsburgh Penguins skating around the ice with the Stanley Cup. And I was
maybe you were walking around where I was watching it. It's similar. I remember exactly what happened Game 7, because me and not the wife, she was a girlfriend at the time, but future wife, we had bought tickets a while ago to go see Dane Cook. And back 10 years ago, Dane Cook was like huge, and it was tickets at the Palace. And as soon as it went to Game 7, I'm like, we can't go to the concert. We have to. I need to watch Game 7. And we ended up watching Game 7, and I was very upset.
Yeah,
I was called a very sore loser. I had to walk out. I was watching it with my brother and my sister-in-law with my wife there, and I was like, as soon as they did it, I was like, turn it off. And they're like, why? And I'm like, fine. I'm walking out of the room then, because I'm not going to watch this garbage.
Yeah, it was tough. But it was a good rivalry, the Red Wings and the Penguins. The Wings won one, and the Penguins got us. And it's a situation in
And
which
you have to give Ken Holland credit for that, for getting to that point.
Yeah, give him credit. Now, when we turn our attention and actually start some serious sports discussion, you look at it and you say, okay, now there's a new head man in charge of the Red Wings. It's Steve Yzerman. Does he match? Does he repeat? Is he able to match the resume of Ken Holland? Because Ken Holland set the standard. Steve Yzerman is 53 years old. He's coming into an organization basically starting a rebuild. Yeah, they have some talent, but he's going to have to try and finagle some moves over the next season or two, maybe even 3, before they get back into some sense of real competitiveness. So you're talking about 3 years in, he's 55, 56. Ken Holland was able to put up 3 Stanley Cups. Do you think Steve Yzerman gets close to that with 2 or maybe even 3? A lot of people on our Twitter page, when I put the poll up, don't believe it, so they don't think that Steve Yzerman can even achieve what Ken Holland did, which makes it an interesting discussion. But do you think Steve Yzerman can do some damage and really help the Red Wings organization come back to respectability?
I think it's always possible. And you just look at what he did in Tampa Bay. He made that team a perennial team that's always competing. And most people would have assumed they would still be competing right now if they didn't get, unceremoniously swept out of the playoffs this year in the first round by the Blue Jackets. But, I think he can totally bring it around. I think it's too early to say, if he's going to win Stanley Cups and how many Stanley Cups he's going to win. Ken Holland walked into a perfect situation. He walked into a Stanley Cup winning team, then won another Stanley Cup, and they retained all this talent. It was a different era of NHL hockey back then. It was pre-social media and everything. So it's just things are way different now, and I think there's a lot more parity in the NHL than really in any league, in any other of the professional leagues, because any team could legitimately go out there and have a chance. If you just happen to toss the Red Wings into the playoffs this year, there's a possibility that they could have actually won a series, because at the end of the season, they weren't doing that bad. So that's what's great about the NHL. So I'm going to give Steve Yzerman a chance, because he said it in his press conference. This is going to take time. And we do have pieces. I know that he's made shrewd moves down in Tampa Bay, and I think he can make those same kind of moves up here in Detroit to build this franchise back up.
Well, the marker's 3. Do you think he gets 20 years and 3 Stanley Cups? If he gets to stay here to 70, maybe there's an opportunity for him to get 3, but I think the high-end maybe expectation is in the next decade to 15 years. If he can get to 2, it'll make his tenure very successful. I think that Stevie Yzerman is still considered the face of Detroit sports. He's got a lot of people that support him. I think he can get at least 1. I think that's a given, 1. But the second and third, can he build a consistent dynasty? That would be fascinating, because then he could be the mayor of Detroit sports. He could do no wrong. He basically could become the de facto owner of the Red Wings, because you just almost have to identify the Red Wings with Steve Yzerman. If he can do it as a player and do it as a general manager, oh my goodness, you could be looking at really an epic run for a guy synonymous with an organization. But 3 is tough, so that's why I'm going to go with I don't think he does it. I think he gets 2. My thinking is Yzerman's tenure as general manager will result in 2 Stanley Cups, and it'll be an opportunity for us to debate the tenures of Ken Holland versus Stevie Yzerman. But I do think it's fair, like I put on our Twitter page, that we at least thank Ken Holland for the work that he did. Look, he's going over to Edmonton. He's got his own struggles. He's going to have to deal with some situations and stuff going on with Edmonton, that media market, and some of the reasons why they haven't had success in the last decade. But I do think it's fair that we thank Ken Holland for the contributions that were made. I mean, I think it's fair that he gets some credit for what he did actually do.
I'm not sure if I give all the credit there to Ken Holland, because I think you have to give that to the international scouts who were out there and who watched Datsuk in outdoor games in Russia all those years ago. But, it was ultimately Ken Holland who trusted his scouts and pulled the trigger when they did. So, yeah, you give him credit for what he did. Thank him. I mean, I don't think this is as hard feelings as maybe Joe Dumars has because I think from 2004 to when he left, that was a hard fall. And I think Ken Holland, it was just a gradual, just ineptitude. So, there's no hard feelings for Ken Holland.
All right, before we transition to talk about Miguel Cabrera and his recent interactions with the media, what one move bothers you the most, a signing, a trade that Ken Holland did? Because people are now looking at the things that he did recently, and that fuels their frustrations, whether it be the David Legwan trade, whether it be refusing absolutely to play the young cats, whether it be the long contracts for Franz Nielsen, Justin Abdelkader, Helm, continuing to have Eriksson on the roster, not firing Jeff Blashill. What move would you say most frustrates you in terms of why the Red Wings aren't as successful as they should be in 2019 going forward?
Absolutely. This is without a doubt. It's the choosing Johan Franzen over Marian Hossa. That, I think, one move alone could have changed the history of what happened for the Red Wings. And it really could have changed what happened in the NHL, because if we re-signed Hossa as opposed to Franzen, we could have still been competing for Stanley Cups. Whereas we lost, did we lose Franzen right away? Or, he at least started going downhill pretty quick. And we all know what happens. Marian Hossa goes to the Blackhawks. Blackhawks have all the success that they have. Yeah. So, and that's all the bad long contracts, the not playing the younger talent, that's just stemmed from, I think that really has stemmed from that one signing. And it killed us. And and maybe they didn't really see that happening, and maybe it is dumb luck, but man, that's the worst one to me.
Yeah, a lot of people are frustrated with that move, especially because of the fact that Franzen so quickly deteriorated. But unfortunately, he had concussions. It wasn't like Franzen wasn't productive. It wasn't like he wasn't a brute force. And part of the reason why I think Kenny Holland made that move was I think Franzen was a good fit. He was the next Holmstrom. He was a guy that was a elite power forward, and I think that they felt like there was more of a future, a better fit with Johan Franzen.
That's the problem, is that you're basing your future on a guy like Thomas Holmstrom. That's not who you build your franchise around. Hossa is a piece who can take you to upper levels.
See, yeah, and that's a decision that he made, and unfortunately, yeah, it was a bad one. But currently, yeah, some of the moves, the long contracts for Justin Abdelkader, Franz Nielsen, there's a lot of bad contracts that he gave out. So those that criticize him, I definitely understand that. I understand those that are not as happy. But I do think that we should rate Ken Holland fairly. And fairly speaking, I think he did an okay job. He should be definitely respected, well respected. In a few years, I think as we look back in history, people will be more favorable to Ken Holland. Now, when we turn our attention to the Detroit Tigers, you're starting to see what happens when somebody with a really high contract, paid a lot of money, is starting to talk a little bit in the media. And whether or not Miggy was really aware of what was going on, his comments were really fascinating when he was pressed by the Detroit Free Press. A reporter there asked him, like, okay, what's going on with your power numbers? You only got one home run to start the season. And he basically says, and in so many words, look, Prince Fielder ain't here anymore. I'm not getting any protection. They're throwing me pitches that I can't really hit out of the ballpark. If you know baseball, you know that. But when you actually watch day-to-day, he actually is swinging and missing a lot of pitches that maybe in the past Miguel Cabrera would have. But many people are viewing it as Miguel throwing his teammates under the bus and not being the best teammates. But others are saying, look, it's kind of true. If he comes out and says it, why is it disrespectful? Nico Goodrum and Dixon and Candelario, they're not in the category of Johnny Peralta, Prince Fielder, Victor Martinez. Which side are you on? Are you upset with Miguel Cabrera for saying it, or do you say, you know what, he's just speaking the truth, which is all we can ask for as sports fans?
You can't blame him for that. It's a tough position that he's in, and it really is. It's the truth, and it's just, I think this is it's an ebb and flow of the season. So many of all the years we've been doing this show, so many times with the Tigers, I've always said it's a roller coaster ride, and Miguel Cabrera, he's going to have his good months. He's going to have, now he's going to have more bad months as he ages and deals with more injuries and just generally getting older. And that's what happens. We hope that he's going to, his numbers increase, but unfortunately this is what it's going to be. I mean, he's not built like David Ortiz. David Ortiz is a guy who was a DH forever at the end of his career, and that's all he did. He went out there and crushed the ball. And I just don't – that's not the type of player that Miguel Cabrera is. If he wants to devote himself to being that type of player, then that would be another story.
Okay, you understand and you favor Miguel. You understand why he said it. But is it something that needed to be said publicly? Because some would argue, look, right now the Detroit Tigers are around 500. If he picks it up a little bit and he's more professional and he kind of answers that question differently, maybe you don't have this being talked about for the better part of a couple days and people addressing it and things like that, wondering if there's an issue in the clubhouse regarding how Miggy feels about the organization kind of playing a bunch of young cats, because it can't be easy for a guy like Miguel Cabrera now to maybe not be as respected by the fans, to have some more negativity being talked about. I mean, I'm almost certain he probably was a little bit surprised that people are even questioning him regarding his power. I think he assumes, and he thinks that, well, if you look at the lineup, you realize that I'm not really part of the best team, and I'm still productive. I'm still batting around 300. I'm still driving in a couple runs here and there. Maybe the home runs aren't going to fly out of the ballpark, but it might come around, and if you trust me, then you'll see that I'm Miguel Cabrera. I just think that he might have been surprised at even being questioned regarding his decline. But I do think fans now are viewing Miguel Cabrera very negatively. He never brought a title to Detroit. That contract is a hindrance for a team that's rebuilding, and I think now you're starting to see some of the fans actually turn legitimately on Miguel Cabrera.
And that's just a bummer. It sucks because he was a face of the franchise, but it's just he got caught up in the numbers game. We didn't win when we had the chance, and I gotta say that if somehow, let's say he gets traded at the trade deadline or sometime in the near future, before he retires, if he doesn't retire as a Tiger, the fan base will sorely miss him, because there's another guy who we paid a lot of money to and also didn't win a championship, and that guy's name is Justin Verlander. And people still think fondly of Justin Verlander. I think fondly of Justin Verlander. He didn't bring a championship here, so I think it sucks that people are killing him in the media for this, but he's telling the truth, and if the Tigers really were serious, then they would try to build something around him, but they can't. They don't have the money, they don't have the assets, and unless they're going to bring up Casey Mize and all the other young starters and try to see what the kids got, then we're going to be stuck doing this for the next couple of years.
So Jason says fair with Miggy. I say foul. I think he could have addressed this much differently. I think that Miguel Cabrera might have caused a rift in that clubhouse, but I don't think it'll last long. I think there's a lot of youth in that clubhouse. I think that everyone's just trying to do their job, learn, and a manager like Ron Gardenhire will squash it pretty quickly. I think that we're seeing that with less talent, Ron Gardenhire pretty much is a decent manager. I think he's a fair manager. I think he keeps everybody on even keel. He'll talk to people when they need to be talked to, and I think that for where the Tigers are, I think Ron Gardenhire is doing a decent job. I mean, 15 wins, 16 losses. They're in a lot of games. They're competitive. Some of the young cats are actually doing well. You got a couple people that are brought up. You got Spencer Turnbull, who's a guy that people are paying attention to. So we're still paying attention. So I just think that Miguel Cabrera maybe could be more positive and uplifting when addressing the media, especially when you got cats like Nico Goodrum, who actually has more home runs than Miguel Cabrera. So I just think that maybe he would, if he thought about it, address that question differently.
I mean, if this was a couple years ago, back when Brad Auspis was the manager and Miguel Cabrera had said that, I might be a little bit more worried. But with a more steady-handed manager in Gardenhire, I'm not worried about this.
Okay, good. Are you picking into the Tigers with what they're doing?
It's still it's all just a rebuild, man. So I mean, I'll watch the box scores, and if they somehow are leading the division or are scratching for a wild card, I'll pay a little bit more attention.
Quickly, I want to thank the fine sponsor of this podcast. 4 great locations all across Metro Detroit. Go check out a great sponsor, the Motor City Pawnbrokers. Visit MotorCityPawnbrokers.com for all information regarding a great pawn shop. They're doing great work to try and change the perception of pawn shops. If you're looking for great deals, great customer service, 4 great locations all across Metro Detroit. Go check out MotorCityPawnbrokers.com, a great sponsor of the network. All right, Jason, one of the biggest controversies in sports happened over the weekend. Now, I don't think you and I are big horse racing guys, but around the time of the big events, the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness Stakes, the Belmont, we definitely peek in a little bit. And how fascinating was it that the Kentucky Derby got hit with a replay, in essence? The second-place finisher actually called and looked at and requested a review. They called, oh, wait a minute, there's a foul, there's something going on wrong, there's an objection. There was an objection in the Kentucky Derby, and it affected the winner. Are you upset by it? Are you saying, oh my God, not the Kentucky Derby too? Most people that are looking at it are saying it's a fair ruling. Maximum Security broke the rules, but does it take the luster away from a race where one horse, Maximum Security, was really wire to wire the best horse in the field, and unfortunately doesn't get the crown, doesn't get the spoils, doesn't get to be named the Kentucky Derby winner as a result of a rule? Do you think it's fair, or do you say, well, it's a rule, you have to follow it?
It's a goddamn rule. Follow the rules. I don't care. This is like going to a Saints fan and going, oh, you guys played a really good game, but because that we missed that pass interference call, you just got to give it to the Rams. The best part about it is that they got the call right. It would be one thing if they did that whole thing and then they determined that Maximum Security was still the winner of the race. The fact that they were able to review it and that they determined who the actual winner was, that's how it should be. There are set rules. Let the people who are supposed to win. What sucks is that I think there were a couple horses who still were in the race at that time who essentially got pushed out of it because of what Maximum Security did.
Yeah, everyone that looked at it said, yeah, oh yeah. Even people that were known handicappers that put bets said, oh, that's noticeable. He didn't follow the line. He made an objectionable move. So everybody that looked at it understands the rule. But I think what is causing a lot of angst is sometimes the other side will say, you know what, sometimes human error comes into play. Sometimes you say to yourself, you know what, a rule like that maybe comes in, but it wasn't called right away until there was an objection. Maybe it could have went through. Maybe in this case, maybe the rule in and of itself is a bad one. Maybe you say, you know what, sometimes it's horse racing. Sometimes in racing, you got to kind of cut people off. That's not a rule in NASCAR where you got to take a straight line. Some people are even questioning the nature of the rule in and of itself, saying, oh, come on, a horse has to keep, on a certain line. Why not just do away with a rule like that? But I look at it and I say they got the call right. I just think that the variable that is affecting everybody was initially when Maximum Security wins and it's called. Now, it wasn't called officially, but when people are looking at it gambling-wise, many people get excited when they see the horse cross the finish line, and the next thought in their brain is, cha-ching, I just made money. And for whatever reason, if it was a real rule, not a real rule, whether it was a video replay or however it came down, when you take money out of folks' pockets, they're going to be pissed, and they don't care about rules. They don't care about the sanctity of the sport. They don't care about any of that. They say, you know what, I bet on Maximum Security. I want my money, and I'm not happy. And I think that's the biggest variable that's causing such a big stink for all these people, because $9 million was bet on Maximum Security, and it was lost. And I think that's where a lot of this anger comes from.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't feel bad for those people, because if you're betting that kind of money on horse racing and you just have this disposable income, I have zero sympathy for you, because I need money. Give me that money. If you're willingly, just throwing your money away, give it to a better thing. Give it to charity. Give it to me. Give it to the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. We could do a lot of You do a lot of stuff with $9 million.
The Kentucky Derby. So you don't think it jumped the shark? You don't think that it'll hurt the sport going forward, do you?
I mean, it might jump the shark. I mean, horse racing as it is, we only pay attention to it for these 3 races. Like, there might be an odd race here or there that we might tune in for, but horse racing is what it is. It's the Kentucky Derby, it's the Preakness, it's the Belmont, and if anybody is actually paying attention to horse racing outside of that, you're either an owner, a jockey, or a degenerate gambler.
You can follow Jason on Twitter at Jarvie the King. You can follow the network at Detroit Podcast. I always enjoy the opportunity to talk to Jason. He keeps it real. He's a fair-minded guy, not into the BS nonsense that's out there on Twitter. He's a guy that's going to tell it to you straight, and that's why we have him here when we get a chance on the Motor City Sports Rant. I enjoyed the conversation, Jason. Let's get back at it as soon as possible and keep talking about all the great things in the world of sports.
For sure, we can break down Jelani Tavai.
Oh, it's about that time, baby. Organized team activities, rookie mini camps. We're getting closer, baby. We're in May, just a couple more months, and then we'll get into training camp, and then we can delve right in, baby.
I'm excited. I'm ready.
For Jason Jarvie, I am the Doc. You've just downloaded the latest edition of the Motor City Sports Rant. For all news regarding the network, go check out our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Greatly appreciate it. See everybody next week.
Later.
Okay, nice idiot. F you. Bye-bye.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.